Jungkook claimed he had finally found the woman of his dreams, but when Jimin discovered who she was, tears of happiness revealed a secret neither had expected. Jimin, I think I finally found her. The words struck Jimin so suddenly that the glass in his hand nearly slipped from his fingers. Rain hammered against the apartment windows, turning the city beyond the glass into a blur of silver lights and dark shadows. Jimin slowly looked up from the notebook resting on his lap. Across the room, Jungkook stood beside the kitchen counter, still wearing the black coat he had worn outside. His hair was damp from the rain, droplets clinging to the ends and sliding down the side of his face. Yet there was something different about Jungkook tonight. He was smiling. Not his usual careless smile. Not the smile he used when he wanted to hide exhaustion. This one was softer. Almost frightened. Jimin stared at him for several seconds before forcing a laugh. You found someone? Jungkook nodded. Jimin closed the notebook. For reasons he couldn't explain, the simple movement suddenly felt heavier than it should have. Jungkook walked toward the sofa and dropped himself into the seat opposite Jimin. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers intertwined tightly. His habit of rubbing his thumb against his knuckle appeared whenever he was nervous, and Jimin knew that habit better than anyone. You're serious, Jimin whispered. I've never been more serious. Jimin swallowed. For years, Jungkook had joked about love. He had dated casually, rejected blind dates, and laughed whenever friends tried to convince him that there was someone waiting for him somewhere. Jungkook always said he would know when he met the right person. Apparently, he had finally met her. Jimin forced another smile. So, Jimin said, trying to sound amused, what is she like? Jungkook's eyes softened. She makes me feel safe. Jimin's smile froze. Jungkook continued, unaware of the tiny change in Jimin's expression. She doesn't ask me to pretend. I don't have to be strong around her. I don't have to explain every silence. When I'm tired, she somehow knows. When I don't want to talk, she doesn't force me. She just stays. Jimin lowered his eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. You sound pretty sure, Jimin said. I am. How long have you known her? Jungkook hesitated. Longer than you think. Jimin looked up. What does that mean? Jungkook smiled mysteriously. It means I should have realized it much earlier. Jimin felt an uncomfortable pressure forming in his chest. He hated himself for it. He hated the tiny voice inside his mind asking a question he had no right to ask. Who is she? Jungkook stood and walked toward the window. For a moment, the city lights reflected across his face. You know what the strangest part is? Jungkook asked. What? I used to think love would feel like fireworks. Jimin remained silent. But it doesn't, Jungkook said. It feels like coming home. Those words entered Jimin's heart more deeply than they should have. He looked down at his notebook again. The page was filled with unfinished sentences. Jimin had always written when he couldn't say something aloud. It was an old habit that had started when he was young. Whenever his thoughts became too complicated, he wrote them down and hid the pages inside drawers, books, and forgotten boxes. Tonight, one particular sentence was still visible at the bottom of the page. I wonder what would happen if I finally told him. Jimin quickly closed the notebook. You should introduce me to her, Jimin said. Jungkook turned around. I will. When? Soon. That sounds suspicious. Jungkook laughed. Jimin smiled with him, but the laughter felt strangely distant. Jungkook walked back to the sofa and sat beside him this time. You're not going to ask her name? Jimin glanced at him. I was waiting for you to tell me. Jungkook stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. Her name is... He stopped. Jimin waited. Never mind. Jimin frowned. Jungkook. I want you to meet her first. That makes no sense. It will. Jimin shook his head. You're being dramatic. Maybe. Jungkook leaned back against the sofa. For several minutes, neither spoke. The rain continued falling. Jimin could hear the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. He could smell coffee from the mug Jungkook had forgotten on the table. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle passed through the wet street, its engine fading into the night. Then Jungkook quietly said, "I'm scared." Jimin immediately turned toward him. Jungkook rarely admitted fear. "What are you afraid of?" "Losing her." The answer came without hesitation. Jimin's expression softened. "Then don't lose her." Jungkook looked at him. "It's not that simple." "Why?" "Because I don't know if she realizes how much she means to me." Jimin's heart tightened. "Then tell her." Jungkook smiled sadly. "I wish I could." "You can. Maybe someday." Jimin studied his face. There was something hidden behind Jungkook's eyes. Something he wasn't saying. And Jimin knew Jungkook well enough to recognize when his friend was carrying a secret. The next morning, Jimin woke to the sound of his phone vibrating repeatedly. He reached for it without opening his eyes. 7 messages. All from Jungkook. Jimin finally opened them. "Wake up. I need your help. It's important. Please don't ask questions." Jimin sat up immediately. Another message appeared. "Come to the old cafe. Now." 20 minutes later, Jimin arrived at the cafe Jungkook had mentioned. The place was nearly empty. Warm yellow lights reflected against the wooden tables, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Jungkook was sitting in the corner, staring at a small envelope. When Jimin approached, Jungkook looked up. "You came. You said it was important." "It is." Jimin sat opposite him. "What happened?" Jungkook pushed the envelope across the table. Jimin looked at it. There was no name. No address. Only a small handwritten symbol on the front. A crescent moon. "What is this?" "A letter." "For you?" Jungkook shook his head. "For her." Jimin stared at him. "You're giving her a letter?" "I already wrote it. And I can't give it to her." "Why?" Jungkook looked down. "Because I'm afraid she'll misunderstand." Jimin slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He hesitated. "Can I read it?" Jungkook nodded. Jimin unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Jungkook's. "I spent years searching for someone who would understand the parts of me I never showed anyone. Then I realized I had been looking in the wrong direction. You were never far away. You were there through every bad day, every mistake, every moment when I thought I wasn't worth staying for. I don't know when friendship became something more precious than anything I've ever known. I only know that when I imagine my future, you're already there." Jimin stopped reading. His fingers trembled. He looked at Jungkook. "What does this mean?" Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin's eyes returned to the letter. The final sentence waited beneath the others. "Maybe the woman of my dreams isn't the person everyone expects her to be. Maybe she's the person who has been beside me all along." Jimin's breath caught. He slowly placed the letter on the table. "Jungkook." Jungkook looked terrified now. "I told you I found her." Jimin's lips parted. "Who?" Jungkook reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Jimin stared at it. The cafe suddenly seemed too quiet. Jungkook placed the box between them. Then he whispered, "I want you to help me give this to her." Jimin couldn't move. "Why me?" "Because nobody knows her better." Jimin's eyes began to sting. "Jungkook, I know you're going to think I'm crazy." Jimin looked at the velvet box. "No. I've spent weeks trying to find the courage." Jimin's voice became barely audible. "Who is she?" Jungkook took a deep breath. Then he opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny moon-shaped pendant. Jimin stared at it, his eyes filled with tears.
Because he recognized it.
It was the exact necklace Jimin had once shown Jungkook in a shop window years ago.
Jimin had forgotten about that day.
Jungkook hadn't. You remember this? Jungkook asked. Jimin touched the pendant with trembling fingers. You kept it. I bought it the next day.
Why?
Jungkook smiled. Because you said it was beautiful. Jimin looked at him, tears finally escaping. Jungkook reached across the table and gently wiped one tear from Jimin's cheek. Don't cry. Jimin laughed through his tears. I'm not crying. You are. It's the coffee. Jungkook laughed softly. For the first time that morning, the tension between them disappeared. Jungkook closed the box. There is something else you need to know. Jimin looked at him. What? Jungkook's expression became serious. The woman I've been talking about. He paused. Jimin waited. She isn't someone I just met. Jungkook's fingers tightened around the velvet box. She has been part of my life for years. Jimin's heart pounded. And I've finally realized that every time I imagined the person I wanted beside me, I was imagining her face. Jimin stared at him. Who is she? Jungkook smiled. Then he pushed the velvet box toward Jimin. Look at the engraving underneath. Jimin turned the box over. There, hidden beneath the velvet lining, were two small letters engraved in silver. JM. Jimin's breath disappeared. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Jungkook watched him carefully. I thought you would be happy, Jungkook whispered. Jimin covered his mouth as another wave of tears filled his eyes.
Happy.
He was happier than he had words for. Because after years of hiding a feeling he had been terrified to name, Jimin finally understood why Jungkook had always looked at him differently when he thought Jimin wasn't watching. Jimin slowly raised his eyes. You're talking about me. Jungkook's smile trembled. I've always been talking about you, Jimin. Jimin laughed through his tears. The rain outside had stopped. Sunlight began slipping through the cafe windows, illuminating the tiny silver moon in Jimin's hands. For years, Jimin had believed that some feelings were meant to remain secret because revealing them could destroy everything. But as Jungkook reached across the table and took his hand, Jimin realized that sometimes the greatest risk was not confessing. Sometimes the greatest risk was spending an entire lifetime pretending you didn't already know the answer. Jungkook squeezed Jimin's hand. I was going to call you my best friend forever. Jimin smiled. And now? Jungkook looked directly into his eyes. Now I want to call you the person I come home to. Jimin's tears returned. This time, he didn't hide them. And when Jungkook smiled, Jimin finally understood that the woman of Jungkook's dreams had never been a woman at all. It had always been Jimin. Jimin did not let go of Jungkook's hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe seemed to have disappeared around them, leaving only the warmth of Jungkook's fingers wrapped around Jimin's and the soft golden sunlight spilling across the table. Jimin stared at their hands as if he were seeing them for the first time. You've been talking about me this whole time? Jimin finally whispered. Jungkook nodded. Yes. Then why did you call me a woman? Jungkook laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Because I knew if I said your name from the beginning, you would panic. I am panicking. I notice. Jimin laughed through the last of his tears. Jungkook smiled. Jimin knew that smile. He had seen it years ago, back when they were younger. Whenever Jungkook accomplished something he was proud of, but didn't want anyone else to know how much it mattered to him, he would smile exactly like this and look away. Jimin had always thought it was adorable. He had never imagined that one day it would make his heart hurt this much. You should have told me, Jimin said. I was afraid. Of me? Of losing you. Jimin's expression changed. Jungkook looked down at their hands. You are the one person I couldn't afford to lose. If I told you how I felt and you didn't feel the same, everything between us could have changed. Jimin's eyes softened. You thought I would leave? I thought you might need distance. I wouldn't. You don't know that.
이도.
Jungkook looked up. Jimin's voice trembled. I've been afraid too. Jungkook became completely still. Afraid of what? Jimin looked toward the window. The city was beginning to wake. Cars moved slowly along the wet streets, their tires whispering against the pavement. People hurried beneath umbrellas, unaware that inside the small cafe, two people were quietly rewriting years of their lives. I was afraid that if I told you, Jimin said, you would look at me differently. Jungkook's eyes widened. You. Jimin smiled sadly. I've loved you for a long time. The words were quiet, almost painfully simple, but Jungkook looked as though Jimin had just handed him the entire world. You knew? Jimin shook his head.
No.
I only knew that whenever you were hurting, I wanted to be the person who stayed. Whenever you were happy, I wanted to be the first person you told. Whenever you disappeared, I couldn't sleep. Jungkook's eyes became glassy. And whenever you talked about someone else, Jimin continued, I told myself I was happy for you. Jungkook swallowed. Were you?
No.
Jungkook laughed softly. Jimin smiled. Not even a little. For a few seconds, they simply looked at each other. Then Jungkook stood. Jimin raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Come here.
Why?
Just come here. Jimin stood. Jungkook pulled him into a hug. It was not dramatic. There was no music, no audience, no perfect moment prepared for them. It was simply Jungkook holding Jimin as tightly as he could. Jimin closed his eyes. He could smell rain on Jungkook's coat and the faint scent of coffee clinging to his sweater. Jungkook's heartbeat was fast against his chest. Jimin smiled. You're shaking. So are you. I am not. You are. Jimin laughed quietly. Maybe a little. Jungkook tightened his arms around him. I've wanted to do this for so long. Jimin's voice became soft. Then don't let go yet. I won't. They stayed like that until the cafe owner politely cleared his throat from behind the counter. Jimin immediately stepped back. Jungkook burst out laughing. Jimin covered his face. This is embarrassing.
Why?
Because everyone is watching. There are 3 people in here. That's 3 too many. Jungkook laughed harder. For the first time in years, Jimin felt completely light. But happiness, he would later realize, could sometimes be frightening precisely because it made you aware of everything you had to lose. That afternoon, Jimin returned home with the silver necklace around his neck. He stood in front of the mirror for nearly 10 minutes. The moon-shaped pendant rested against his collarbone. He touched it gently. He remembered the shop window. It had been years ago. Jimin had pointed at the necklace and said, "That one looks like something I'd wear." Jungkook had teased him. "You like moons too much." What don't I understand? Some things are beautiful because they're far away. Jungkook had looked at him strangely that day. Jimin had forgotten the conversation. Jungkook apparently hadn't. A soft knock came at the door. Jimin turned. Jungkook stood there holding 2 paper bags. I brought food. You've been here for 5 minutes. I know. Jimin laughed. I wanted to see you. The simplicity of the sentence made Jimin's cheeks warm. You're different today. So are you.
How?
Jungkook pointed at the necklace. You're wearing my gift. Jimin touched the pendant. I like it. I know. You're very confident. I'm trying to be. Jimin smiled. They sat on the floor beside the coffee table, eating takeout from paper containers. For a while, everything felt ordinary. Jungkook complained about the restaurant forgetting his favorite sauce. Jimin stole pieces of food from Jungkook's container. Jungkook complained again. Jimin ignored him. It was exactly the kind of evening they had shared countless times before. Yet everything had changed. Their shoulders touched. Their hands occasionally brushed. Every small contact now carried a meaning neither had allowed themselves to acknowledge before. After dinner, Jimin noticed Jungkook staring at him. What? Nothing. You're staring. I like looking at you. Jimin almost choked on his drink. Jungkook. What? You can't suddenly say things like that. Why not? Because what? Jimin looked away. Because I'm not used to it. Jungkook smiled. Then get used to it. Jimin shook his head. You're impossible. And you're beautiful. Jimin froze. Jungkook immediately laughed.
See?
You're doing it again. Doing what? Turning red. I am not. You are. Jimin threw a cushion at him. Jungkook caught it. They both laughed. Later that night, Jimin found Jungkook standing on the balcony. The city was quiet beneath them. Jimin stepped outside. You okay? Jungkook nodded. I'm thinking. About. You. Jimin leaned against the railing. What about me? Jungkook looked at him. I keep thinking about how many years we wasted. Jimin's smile faded. We didn't waste them. Maybe not. Jungkook looked toward the distant lights. But I wish I had been brave sooner. Jimin stood beside him. You're brave now. Jungkook turned. Are you sure? Yes. How do you know? Because you're standing here. Jungkook smiled. Then his expression became serious. Jimin. Yes. If this ever becomes too much. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? I mean everything changes after today. Jimin considered his words. Maybe. You're not scared? I am. Jungkook's eyes softened. But I'm more scared of going back to pretending, Jimin said. Jungkook looked at him for a long time. Then he reached for Jimin's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally.
No hesitation.
No fear.
No pretending.
Jimin looked down at their hands. I spent years thinking I was protecting our friendship, he said. What do you think now? That I was protecting myself. Jungkook nodded. Me too. The wind moved through Jimin's hair. Jungkook gently brushed a strand away from his face. Jimin closed his eyes for a second. The gesture was so tender that it almost hurt. I have one question, Jimin whispered. Ask. Why did you say you found the woman of your dreams? Jungkook smiled. Because I wanted to see your reaction. You're terrible. I know. And because I wanted to know whether you would be jealous. Jimin stared at him. You deliberately tried to make me jealous? Yes. Why? Because I was terrified that I was the only one feeling this way. Jimin shook his head. You could have just asked me. I was scared. You're still scared? Yes. Jimin smiled. Good. Jungkook looked confused. Why is that good? Jungkook squeezed his hand. It matters more than anything. The following weeks were not perfect. There were awkward mornings. There were moments when Jimin suddenly became shy around Jungkook. There were times when Jungkook instinctively reached for Jimin's hand in public, then remembered that their relationship was still something new and uncertain. They had to learn each other again. Not as best friends. Not as two people who had spent years pretending nothing was there. But as two people who had finally opened a door they had been afraid to touch. Jimin discovered that Jungkook became quiet whenever he was overwhelmed. Jungkook discovered that Jimin hummed softly while cooking. Jimin learned that Jungkook hated thunderstorms but pretended not to. Jungkook learned that Jimin kept old receipts from meaningful days because he couldn't bear throwing away memories. They began collecting new memories. A midnight drive with no destination. A morning when Jungkook burned breakfast and insisted it was intentional. A quiet evening when Jimin fell asleep on Jungkook's shoulder while an old movie played on television. Nothing extraordinary happened, and yet everything felt extraordinary. One evening, Jungkook returned home carrying a small wooden box. Jimin looked at it suspiciously. "What is that?" "A secret." "That's never a good answer." Jungkook sat beside him. "Open it." Jimin lifted the lid. Inside were photographs.
Dozens of them.
Jimin picked up the first one. It showed them years ago, sitting on the steps outside an old building. Another showed them laughing at a restaurant. Another showed Jungkook asleep on Jimin's shoulder. Jimin stared at the photographs. "You kept all of these?" "Every one." "Why?" Jungkook looked embarrassed. "Because I knew someday I would need proof." "Proof of what?" "That I was already in love with you before I understood what love was." Jimin's eyes filled with tears. He looked through the photographs one by one. Each image contained a memory he had almost forgotten. A winter afternoon. A birthday. A long train ride. A night when Jimin had cried after a difficult day and Jungkook had stayed beside him until sunrise. At the bottom of the box was one final photograph. Jimin picked it up. It was different. The picture had been taken from far away. Jimin was standing near a window looking outside. Jungkook was watching him. Jimin stared at the photograph. "When did you take this?" "Years ago." "You were looking at me." "I know." "Why?" Jungkook smiled. "Because I couldn't stop." Jimin pressed the photograph against his chest. "You were hopeless." "I still am." Jimin laughed. Then he leaned toward Jungkook and rested his head against a shoulder. Jungkook wrapped an arm around him. Outside, evening settled over the city. The room filled with soft orange light. Jimin closed his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of the future. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow. He didn't know how complicated love could become. He didn't know what challenges waited beyond their quiet apartment. But he knew one thing. Jungkook had spent years searching for the person he dreamed about. And Jimin had spent years wondering whether he would ever be loved the way he loved. Now they were sitting together, surrounded by old photographs and new promises. Neither of them needed to search anymore. Jungkook lowered his head and whispered, "Jimin. Thank you for staying." Jimin smiled without opening his eyes. "Where else would I go?" Jungkook held him closer. And for that night, there was no fear, no misunderstanding, and no secret left between them. Only two people who had finally stopped running from the truth they had carried quietly for years. 3 months after Jungkook confessed, Jimin began to realize that falling in love was much easier than learning how to live with the fear of losing someone. That fear appeared unexpectedly. Sometimes it arrived in the middle of ordinary mornings, when Jungkook was standing in the kitchen making coffee and humming under his breath. Sometimes it appeared when Jungkook left the apartment without saying exactly when he would return. And sometimes it came at night, when Jimin woke from a dream in which Jungkook was walking away from him, and no matter how loudly Jimin called his name, Jungkook never turned around. Jimin hated those dreams. He hated how real they felt. He hated how, even after waking, his heart continued beating as though he had actually lost Jungkook. One morning, Jimin woke before sunrise. The room was dark. For several seconds, he didn't remember where he was. Then, he felt the warmth beside him. Jungkook was sleeping peacefully. His hair was messy, one arm resting across the pillow, his breathing slow and steady. Jimin watched him. A small smile appeared on his face. He reached out and carefully moved a strand of hair away from Jungkook's forehead. Jungkook stirred. Stop staring at me. Jimin froze. You're awake. Not really. You just spoke. I can talk while sleeping. Jimin laughed softly. That's ridiculous. Jungkook opened one eye. You're still here? Where would I go? Good. Jungkook closed his eyes again. Jimin smiled. For a while, he simply listened to Jungkook breathe. Then his phone vibrated on the nightstand. Jimin reached for it. One message. Unknown number. Jimin frowned. The message contained only one sentence. You don't know everything about Jungkook. Jimin's smile disappeared. He stared at the screen. Another message arrived. Ask him what happened 3 years ago. Jimin's fingers went cold. He looked toward Jungkook. Still asleep. Still peaceful. Jimin immediately deleted the message. He told himself it was nothing. Someone making a cruel joke. Someone trying to create trouble. Someone who didn't understand what Jungkook and Jimin meant to each other. But the sentence remained in his mind. 3 years ago. Jimin knew that period. He remembered Jungkook becoming distant. He remembered Jungkook refusing to explain where he had gone. Whenever Jimin asked, Jungkook had always said the same thing. It was complicated. Jimin had never pushed. Now he wondered whether that had been a mistake. Jungkook opened his eyes. Why are you awake? Jimin quickly locked his phone. Nothing. Jungkook studied him. You're lying.
No.
You always touch your thumb when you're nervous. Jimin looked down. His thumb was rubbing against his palm. Jungkook sat up. What happened? Nothing. Jimin. I said nothing. Jungkook became silent. He didn't push. Instead, he reached for Jimin's hand. Jimin looked at him. Whatever it is, Jungkook said softly, you can tell me. Jimin almost showed him the message. Almost. But something stopped him. Maybe fear. Maybe instinct. Maybe the strange feeling that the truth was larger than a single anonymous text. So Jimin smiled. I just had a bad dream. Jungkook looked at him for several seconds. Then he pulled Jimin closer. Come here. Jimin rested against his chest. Jungkook kissed the top of his head. You're safe. Jimin closed his eyes. But the words didn't calm him. Because suddenly Jimin wasn't afraid of losing Jungkook. He was afraid that there was something about Jungkook's past that could change everything. Later that afternoon, Jimin went to the cafe where they had first confessed their feelings. He sat alone near the window. The weather was clear. Children walked past with their parents. Cars moved slowly through traffic. Everything looked normal. Jimin hated how normal everything looked. He opened his phone and stared at the deleted message. He had saved a screenshot before deleting it. Ask him what happened 3 years ago. Jimin typed a response.
Who are you?
He hesitated. Then pressed send. Nothing happened. 5 minutes.
10. 20.
No answer. Jimin put his phone away. Then he heard a voice behind him. You're Jimin, right? He turned. A woman stood beside the table. She looked to be in her early 30s. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were serious. Yes. My name is Hannah. Jimin frowned. Do I know you?
No.
Then how do you know me? Hannah pulled out a chair. Because I've known Jungkook for a long time. Jimin's heart stopped for a moment. He stared at her. What do you want? To warn you. About Jungkook? Hannah nodded. Jimin leaned back. I don't think you understand. I understand more than you think. What happened 3 years ago? Hannah looked toward the window. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she placed a small photograph on the table. Jimin looked down. His face changed. The photograph showed Jungkook standing beside a hospital entrance. He looked younger. Tired. His face was pale. And beside him stood Hannah. Jimin picked up the photograph. When was this taken? 3 years ago. Why was Jungkook at a hospital? Hannah looked directly at him. Because someone he loved was dying. Jimin's fingers tightened around the photograph.
Who?
Hannah didn't answer. Tell me. I can't.
Why?
Because Jungkook promised never to tell you. Jimin's heart sank. Never to tell me? Hannah nodded. He wanted to protect you. Jimin stared at her. From what? Hannah's expression softened. From the truth. The cafe suddenly felt colder. Jimin placed the photograph on the table. Who was dying? Hannah looked down. His mother. Jimin's expression changed completely. He knew Jungkook's mother had been ill, but he had never known the full story. He remembered the calls Jungkook refused to answer, the nights Jungkook disappeared, the sudden exhaustion, the strange sadness in his eyes. Jimin swallowed. Why didn't he tell me? Because he thought you already had too much to carry. That doesn't make sense. It did to him. Jimin shook his head. He should have trusted me. He did. Then why keep it secret? Because Jungkook believed love meant protecting someone from pain. Jimin looked away. A painful silence settled between them. Hannah continued. His mother died 2 years ago. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. He had known she had passed away, but he hadn't known what Jungkook had gone through. I remember his funeral, Jimin whispered. I know. He wouldn't let me stay. He was afraid you would see him break. Jimin closed his eyes. Suddenly, memories returned. Jungkook standing outside the funeral hall. Jimin approaching him. Jungkook saying, I'm okay. Jimin believing him. Or pretending to. Hannah reached into her bag. There is something else. She placed a folded letter on the table. Jimin stared at it. What is this? Something Jungkook wrote 3 years ago. For his mother?
No.
For you. Jimin's hands trembled. He slowly opened the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable.
Jimin.
If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to tell you something. I don't know whether I'll ever be able to say it aloud. I love you. I have loved you for longer than I understand. But if I disappear, please don't follow me. Please don't ask where I'm going. Please don't wait. I need to take care of something alone. And if I come back different, I hope you'll forgive me. Jimin couldn't continue reading. His vision blurred. He lowered the letter. He wrote this 3 years ago? Hannah nodded. Why didn't you give it to me? Because Jungkook asked me not to. Why now? Hannah looked toward the entrance. Because he has started remembering something. Jimin frowned. What? Something he thought he had forgotten. A cold sensation moved through Jimin. What did he forget? Hannah stood. I can't tell you. You came here to warn me, and now you're refusing to explain? I came because you deserve to know that Jungkook's past isn't finished. Jimin stood. What does that mean? Hannah looked at him. It means someone else knows about the secret.
Who?
Hannah hesitated. Then she whispered a name. Miho. Jimin had never heard the name before. Who is Miho? Hannah's expression hardened. Someone Jungkook thought was gone forever. Then she walked away. Jimin remained standing beside the table. The letter trembled in his hand. He read the final sentence again. If I come back different, I hope you'll forgive me. For the first time since Jungkook had confessed his love, Jimin understood something terrifying. Jungkook hadn't been running from love. He had been running from a past he believed could eventually destroy the life they had built together. That evening, Jungkook came home unusually late. Jimin was waiting in the living room. The lights were off. Only the city illuminated the room through the windows. Jungkook opened the door. Jimin. No answer. He stepped inside. Why are you sitting in the dark? Jimin slowly turned toward him. Who is Miho? Jungkook stopped. The color disappeared from his face. Then he whispered one word. Where did you hear that name? Jimin stood. Answer me. Jungkook's breathing became uneven. Jimin. Who is Miho? Jungkook looked toward the window. His hands began to tremble. Then he closed his eyes. He wasn't supposed to find us. Jimin's heart sank. Find us. Jungkook turned toward him. And for the first time since they had fallen in love, Jimin saw genuine terror in Jungkook's eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for Jimin. Jungkook crossed the room and grabbed Jimin's hands. Listen to me. What is happening? If anything happens, you leave. Jimin pulled his hands away.
No.
Jimin.
No.
You don't get to protect me by lying anymore. Jungkook stared at him. You don't understand. Then explain. I can't.
Why?
Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. Because 3 years ago, I thought I had already lost everything. He took a shaky breath. And now that I finally have you, I'm terrified that someone is going to take you away from me. Jimin stepped closer. Then let me stand beside you. Jungkook looked at him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jungkook pulled Jimin into his arms. His embrace was desperate, almost painful. Jimin wrapped his arms around him. I'm here. Jungkook closed his eyes. I know. You're not alone. I know. Then tell me the truth. Jungkook's arms tightened around him, and after a long silence, he whispered the words Jimin had been waiting to hear. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. The next morning, Jungkook woke before Jimin. For several minutes, he remained completely still, staring at the ceiling while the pale morning light slowly entered the room. He had promised to tell Jimin everything. There was no turning back. Beside him, Jimin was still asleep, one hand resting near Jungkook's pillow. His face looked peaceful, but Jungkook knew that peace would disappear the moment the truth began. Jungkook reached toward him, then stopped. He was afraid to touch him. Not because he didn't want to, because he suddenly wondered whether Jimin would still want him after hearing everything. Jimin opened his eyes. You're awake. Jungkook smiled faintly. Yes. You didn't sleep. I slept. You're a terrible liar. Jungkook laughed quietly. You know me too well. Jimin slowly sat up. Today? Jungkook nodded. Jimin didn't ask what he meant. He already knew. They left the apartment shortly after sunrise. The silence inside the car was heavy. Jimin watched the city pass through the window. Every street looked familiar. Every building seemed ordinary. Yet Jimin felt as though he were traveling toward a version of Jungkook he had never known. After nearly 40 minutes, Jungkook stopped in front of an old house surrounded by tall trees. Jimin stared at it. Where are we? My mother's house. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook turned off the engine. I haven't been here since the funeral. Jimin looked at him. Why bring me now? Because this is where everything started. They stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of old wood and dried flowers. Dust floated through beams of sunlight. Jungkook walked slowly through the hallway. His fingers brushed against the wall as though he were touching memories. This was her favorite place, he said. Jimin followed quietly. She used to wake up before everyone else and open all the windows. She said the house needed fresh air before the people inside it did. Jimin smiled sadly. She sounds kind. She was. Jungkook stopped beside a small wooden cabinet. He opened a drawer. Inside were photographs, old letters, and a small blue notebook. Jungkook picked it up. This belonged to my mother. Jimin waited. She wrote everything down. He opened the notebook. Several pages were filled with handwriting. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he turned the pages. Then he stopped. There. Jimin leaned closer. A name appeared repeatedly. Miho. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Who was he? My mother's younger brother. Jimin's eyes widened. Your uncle? Jungkook nodded. He disappeared when I was young. What happened? My mother said he left because he wanted a different life. Jungkook's voice became quieter. But 3 years ago, I found out that wasn't true. Jimin listened. Miho had been involved with a financial company that was secretly stealing money from several people. My mother discovered it. Jungkook closed his eyes. She tried to expose him. And he threatened her? Yes. Jimin's expression hardened. Jungkook's jaw tightened. But before she could, she became seriously ill. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Was her illness connected to him?
No.
Jungkook shook his head. That was what made everything worse. She was already dying, and Miho knew it. Jimin placed a hand on Jungkook's shoulder. Jungkook continued. He came to the hospital. Why? To take the evidence. Jimin's expression changed. Did he get it?
No.
Jungkook looked at the blue notebook. My mother gave it to me. That's why you disappeared. Yes. Jungkook looked down. I spent weeks moving between places because Miho was looking for me. Jimin's voice softened. You should have told me. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because I knew what Miho was capable of. Jungkook took a slow breath. One night, someone followed me to the apartment. Jimin became still. Who? I don't know. What happened? Jungkook looked toward the window. I left everything behind. Even me? Jungkook's eyes filled with regret. Especially you. Jimin looked away. That was the part that hurt the most. I know. You disappeared. I know. I thought you didn't trust me. I trusted you more than anyone. Then why? Jungkook stepped closer. Because if Miho had realized how important you were to me, you would have become a target. Jimin's eyes closed. Jungkook's voice cracked. I couldn't let that happen. Silence filled the room. Jimin wiped his cheek. I was angry with you. You had every right. I waited for you. I know. I kept thinking you would call. I wanted to. Why didn't you? Because every time I picked up the phone, I imagined someone standing behind you. Jimin looked at him. Jungkook's face was wet with tears. I was terrified, Jungkook admitted. Not of dying. Not of losing my home. I was terrified of someone hurting you because of me. Jimin stepped forward. You should have let me choose. Jungkook nodded. You're right. I might have been scared. I know. But I would have stayed. Jungkook looked at him. I know that now. Jimin reached for his hand. And what happened to Miho? Jungkook looked toward the old notebook. He disappeared after the evidence was handed over. Was he arrested?
No.
Jimin frowned. Then where did he go? We don't know. Jimin understood immediately. That means he's still out there. Jungkook nodded. For 3 years, there was nothing. No messages.
No threats.
Nothing. And now. Jungkook's expression darkened. Now he's back. Jimin held his hand tighter. Because of the notebook? Maybe. Where is it? Jungkook looked at the blue notebook. Here. He opened it again. Several pages had been torn out. Jimin noticed immediately. Someone removed pages. Jungkook nodded. I noticed that yesterday. Do you know what was on them?
No.
Could Miho have taken them? Possibly. Jimin looked through the remaining pages. One sentence caught his attention. Jimin. He froze. Why is my name here? Jungkook immediately took the notebook. What? Jimin pointed at the page. There it was. Jimin. Written in Jungkook's mother's handwriting. Beneath it was a date from 3 years earlier. Jungkook stared. His face went pale. I didn't know about this. Jimin looked at him. What does it mean? Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. They spent the next hour searching the house. Every drawer. Every cabinet. Every old box. Jimin found photographs. Jungkook found receipts. They discovered documents connected to Miho. But nothing explained why Jimin's name appeared in the notebook. Finally, Jimin found a small wooden box hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Jungkook. He came immediately. What is it? I don't know. The box was locked. Jungkook searched the room. Then he remembered something. He reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a thin silver key hanging from a chain around his neck. Jimin stared at it. You've had that all this time? My mother gave it to me. Jungkook inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside was a stack of letters. Jimin's heart began beating faster. The first letter was addressed to Jungkook. The second was addressed to Jimin. Jimin stared at his own name. His hands trembled. He opened it.
Jimin.
If you are reading this, then I hope Jungkook finally trusted you enough to bring you here. You may not understand why your name appears in this house. The truth is simple. You saved my son. Jimin stopped. He looked at Jungkook. What? Jungkook looked equally confused. Jimin continued reading. 3 years ago, Jungkook came to me broken and frightened. He believed he had to carry everything alone. But whenever he spoke about you, his voice changed. You were the reason he kept going. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. His fingers trembled as he turned the page. I knew he loved you before he did. Jungkook covered his mouth. Jimin laughed softly through his tears. Your mother knew. Jungkook shook his head in disbelief. She knew everything. The letter continued. Jungkook believed protecting you meant leaving you. I disagreed. Love should not be measured by how far someone runs away. Love is measured by how courageously someone stays. Jimin couldn't continue. He lowered the letter. Jungkook took it gently. He read the final lines. If Jungkook ever tells you that you are the person he has been searching for, believe him. He has spent too long believing he must deserve love before receiving it. Please remind him that he has always been worthy. Jungkook's tears fell silently. Jimin stepped closer. Your mother loved you very much. I know. She wanted you to be happy. I know. And she wanted you to stop running. Jungkook looked at him. I think I'm finally ready. Jimin wrapped his arms around him. Jungkook buried his face against Jimin's shoulder. For several minutes, they stood silently in the old house. The house that had once contained fear now held something different. Acceptance. Jimin understood why Jungkook had become the person he was. The secretive habits. The constant need to protect everyone. The fear of abandonment. The instinct to disappear whenever life became painful. Jungkook had spent years believing that love was something fragile. Something that could be destroyed by the truth. Jimin wanted to teach him otherwise. You don't have to protect me from everything, Jimin whispered. Jungkook held him tighter. I know. You can be afraid. I know. You can fall apart. Jungkook nodded. I know. And you don't have to disappear. Jungkook pulled away. His eyes were red. I won't. Jimin smiled. Promise. Promise. They left the house in the late afternoon. The sky had turned orange. For the first time, Jungkook looked lighter. He still had questions.
So, did Jimin.
They still didn't know where Miho was or why the missing pages mattered. But the biggest secret between them was finally gone. That night, they returned home. Jimin placed the letter from Jungkook's mother beside the silver necklace. Jungkook watched him. You're keeping it? Yes. Why? Because she gave it to me. Jungkook smiled. Then he sat beside Jimin. Do you still believe I'm the woman of your dreams? Jimin laughed. You're ridiculous. Answer the question. Jimin turned toward him. Yes. Jungkook smiled. Good. Jimin rested his head against Jungkook's shoulder. Because you're stuck with me now. Jungkook kissed his forehead. I've been stuck with you for years. Jimin smiled. Then I guess we're both lucky. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the windows. This time, neither of them feared the storm. They sat together beneath the warm light of the living room, holding hands while the old letter rested safely between them. The past had finally been spoken aloud. And for the first time, Jungkook no longer felt like he was running away from something. He felt like he was walking toward something.
Toward Jimin. Toward home.
Toward a future he had once been too afraid to imagine. The following morning began quietly, but Jimin could feel that something inside Jungkook had changed. Jimin watched him from the doorway. You're thinking again. Jungkook turned. I always think. You think too much. I learned from you. Jimin smiled. That's unfortunate. Jungkook laughed. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then Jimin noticed the blue notebook on the kitchen table. The notebook had belonged to Jungkook's mother. Jungkook had brought it home the previous evening because he wanted to study the remaining pages more carefully. Jimin walked toward it. Did you sleep? Not much. Why? I kept thinking about what my mother wrote. Jimin sat beside him. What part? That you saved me. Jimin looked down. I didn't do anything. You stayed. That isn't the same thing. It is to me. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand. When I was at my worst, everyone kept telling me to be strong. You were the only person who never asked me to be strong. Jimin smiled. I didn't know what to say. You didn't need to. Jimin squeezed his fingers. They sat quietly. Then Jungkook opened the notebook again. There is something we haven't figured out. The missing pages. Yes. Jimin looked at the notebook. Do you think your mother knew where Miho was? Maybe. Then perhaps the missing pages contain the answer. Jungkook nodded. I think so too. They spent the entire morning studying every remaining page. Jimin photographed each one. Jungkook compared dates. Some entries referred to financial transactions. Others mentioned names Jimin didn't recognize. There were references to meetings, documents, and an old warehouse. Then Jimin noticed something. Wait. Jungkook looked over. What? Jimin pointed at the margin of one page. A small crescent moon had been drawn there. Jungkook became still. The same symbol. The one from a letter? Jungkook nodded. The symbol on the envelope I gave you. Jimin stared at it. What does it mean? My mother used it whenever she wanted to mark something important. Important how? I don't know. Jimin turned the page. Another crescent appeared. Then another. They form a pattern. Jungkook leaned closer. The symbols appeared next to different dates. Jimin wrote the dates down. Look. Jungkook examined them. These aren't random. What are they? Locations. Jimin looked at him. How do you know? My mother used to keep a private calendar. Jungkook quickly opened his laptop. He entered the locations. One by one, they appeared on a map. Jimin leaned closer. They all surround one place. Jungkook's expression changed. What? Jimin pointed at the center. An old train station. Why there? Jungkook stared at the screen. I don't know. Have you ever been there? Jungkook shook his head.
No.
Jimin studied his face. You're lying. Jungkook looked at him. I remember something. What? 3 years ago, before I disappeared, my mother told me to go to that station. Jimin's heart tightened. Did you?
No.
Why? I was already being followed. Jimin understood. So, you never found out why she wanted you there?
No.
I always thought it was about the evidence. Maybe it was. Maybe. Jimin touched his arm. We can go there. Jungkook looked at him.
No.
Why? Because if Miho knows about that place, then we go together. Jungkook shook his head. Jimin. You promised. Jungkook stopped. Jimin held his gaze. You promised you wouldn't disappear. Jungkook sighed. You're impossible. You love me. That is precisely the problem. Jimin smiled. That isn't a problem. Jungkook laughed softly. They left after lunch. The old station stood on the outskirts of the city, almost forgotten by time. Its walls were stained with rain. Broken signs hung above the entrance. Weeds grew between the railway tracks. The air smelled of wet earth and rust. Jimin walked beside Jungkook. Are you sure this is the place? Yes. Jungkook looked around. Memories seemed to return with every step. My mother brought me here when I was a child. Why? She liked trains. Jimin smiled. That sounds peaceful. She said trains reminded her that life never stayed in one place. Jimin looked at Jungkook. She was right. They entered the abandoned station. Their footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. Jungkook stopped near an old ticket counter. Here. Jimin approached. What? Jungkook pointed beneath the counter. A small metal box was hidden behind a loose brick. Jimin's eyes widened. You knew?
No.
Jungkook pulled it out. The box was covered in dust. There was another crescent moon carved into the lid. Jungkook opened it. Inside was a small collection of photographs and a folded document. Jimin picked up the photographs. The first showed Jungkook's mother. The second showed Miho. The third showed a much younger Jungkook. Then Jimin saw something unexpected. A photograph of himself. Jimin stared. When was this taken? Jungkook looked at it. I don't know. Jimin turned it over. A date was written on the back. 3 years ago. Jimin's face became serious. I don't remember anyone taking this. Jungkook took the photograph.
이도.
Jimin looked at him. You were outside the hospital. Jungkook nodded. You came to see me. Jimin remembered. He had brought food. Jungkook had refused to see him. Jimin had waited outside for hours. I thought you weren't there. I was. Jimin looked at him. Why didn't you come out? Jungkook's eyes filled with regret. Because my mother had just told me she was afraid someone was following you. Jimin went silent. The photograph suddenly felt heavier. Jungkook looked away. I watched you from the window. You saw me? Yes. And you still didn't come out? I wanted to. Why didn't you? Because I thought loving you meant letting you go. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. You were wrong. I know. Jimin stepped closer. You were wrong. Jungkook nodded. I know. Jimin touched his face. And I'm glad you know now. Jungkook closed his eyes against Jimin's palm. I spent 3 years regretting that moment. You don't have to anymore. Jungkook opened his eyes. Why? Because you're here. They stood quietly inside the abandoned station. Then Jimin unfolded the document. It contained a list of names. At the bottom was a handwritten note. If Jungkook ever finds this, tell him the truth about the person who betrayed us. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Who betrayed your mother? Jungkook's expression changed. I don't know. The answer was barely audible. They read the names again. Most were unfamiliar. Then Jimin noticed one. His expression froze. Jungkook. What? Jimin pointed. This name. Jungkook looked down. His face went pale. The name belonged to someone they both knew. Someone who had been part of their lives for years. Someone Jimin had trusted completely. Jungkook took the paper from him.
No.
What? This can't be right. Maybe it's a mistake. Jungkook shook his head. My mother didn't make mistakes with names. Jimin watched him. Then what does it mean? Jungkook couldn't answer. They left the station before sunset. Neither spoke during the drive home. When they arrived, Jungkook placed the document on the table. Jimin sat opposite him. We need to be careful. I know. Do we confront this person? Not yet. Why? Because we don't know what they know. Jimin nodded. Then we investigate. Jungkook looked at him. Together. Together. That night, neither of them slept easily. Jimin lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Jungkook was beside him. His breathing was slow, but Jimin knew he was awake. Jungkook. Are you afraid? Yes. Me too. Jungkook turned toward him. Jimin reached for his hand beneath the blanket. Then we're afraid together. Jungkook smiled. Together. Jimin closed his eyes. For the first time, the word didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a place where neither of them had to hide. The next morning, Jungkook made breakfast. He burned the toast. Jimin laughed. You're terrible at this. I was distracted. By what? You. Jimin smiled. That's your excuse for everything now. It works. Jimin took the burnt toast from him. I'll make breakfast. You're saving me again. Someone has to. Jungkook watched Jimin move around the kitchen. For a moment, the fear disappeared. The old house. The notebook. Miho. The missing pages. The betrayal. All of it seemed distant. Jungkook realized something important. His mother had been right. Love wasn't about running far enough to keep someone safe. It was about having the courage to remain beside them when life became frightening. Jungkook walked behind Jimin and wrapped his arms around him. Jimin laughed. What are you doing? Nothing. You're holding me while I'm cooking. You're going to make me burn the food. I don't care. Jimin leaned back against him. You're becoming clingy. I waited 3 years. Jimin's smile softened. Then you can have 3 years' worth of hugs. Jungkook smiled against his shoulder. I'll take more. Jimin turned around. How many? All of them. They laughed. The moment was simple.
Warm.
Safe. And perhaps that was what made it meaningful. Because after everything Jungkook had survived, happiness no longer needed to be dramatic. Sometimes happiness was simply waking beside the person you loved. Sometimes it was burnt toast. Sometimes it was laughter in a quiet kitchen. And sometimes it was knowing that whatever came next, Jimin would not be walking away. Jungkook looked at Jimin and smiled. The woman of my dreams. Jimin rolled his eyes. Still using that line? Always. Jimin touched the silver moon around his neck. Then I suppose I'll have to keep pretending I'm a woman. Jungkook laughed. You know what I mean.
이도.
Jungkook kissed Jimin's forehead. And for the first time, the past no longer stood between them. It stood behind them. A chapter they could finally close. Not because every mystery had been solved. Not because every wound had disappeared. But because Jungkook and Jimin had finally learned that love wasn't the absence of fear. Love was choosing to stay even when fear was still there. And Jimin had already chosen. So had Jungkook. For the next several days, Jungkook and Jimin tried to live normally. They went to work. They cooked together. They argued over which movie to watch. Jungkook continued stealing food from Jimin's plate and pretending it was an accident. Jimin continued complaining about it while secretly leaving the best pieces for him. From the outside, nothing had changed. But beneath their ordinary routines, something remained unresolved. The name written on the document. The name belonging to someone they both trusted. Jimin had known that person for years. Jungkook had too. Neither of them wanted to believe the evidence. So they decided not to accuse anyone. They would investigate quietly. One evening, Jimin sat at the dining table surrounded by photographs, copies of documents, and notes. Jungkook walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. You've been staring at that paper for an hour. I know. Have you learned anything?
No.
Jungkook placed the tea beside him. Then stop. Jimin looked up. I can't. You need sleep. You need sleep too. I slept yesterday. That doesn't count. Jungkook smiled. You worry too much. Jimin raised an eyebrow. You disappeared for 3 years and you're telling me I worry too much? Jungkook immediately became quiet. Jimin regretted the words. I'm sorry. Jungkook sat beside him. You don't have to apologize. I shouldn't have said it like that, but it's true. Jimin looked down. I still hate that you went through everything alone. I know. I wish you had trusted me. I know. Jimin sighed. Then Jungkook reached across the table and covered Jimin's hand. But I trust you now. Jimin looked at him. Completely? Completely. The answer was immediate. Jimin smiled. Then let's finish this. Jungkook nodded. They returned to the document. The mysterious name appeared at the bottom of the page. Jimin traced the letters with his finger. Why would your mother write this person down? Maybe they were involved in the financial scheme. Or maybe they helped her. Jungkook looked at him. You think they're innocent? I think we don't know enough yet. Jungkook smiled. That is exactly why I love you. Jimin's cheeks warmed. You can't say things like that when I'm trying to concentrate. Why? Because then I forget what I'm doing. Good. Jimin laughed. You're impossible. Jungkook leaned closer. And you're adorable when you're frustrated. Jimin pushed a shoulder. Focus. I am focused. On the investigation. I was focused on you. Jungkook.
Fin.
They worked until midnight. Then Jimin noticed something unusual. A receipt had been tucked between 2 pages of the notebook. He picked it up. What is this? Jungkook looked over. A storage facility. The receipt was dated 3 years earlier. There was an address printed beneath the name. Jimin stared. Do you know this place? Jungkook shook his head.
No.
Then, why did your mother have the receipt? Maybe she rented a storage unit. Can we check? Jungkook hesitated. Yes. The next morning, they drove to the storage facility. It stood behind an old commercial building on the edge of the city. The hallways smelled of concrete, dust, and metal. Jungkook carried the receipt. Jimin walked beside him. They found the unit number. Jungkook inserted the key provided by the facility manager. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside was darkness. Jimin reached for the light. A single bulb flickered overhead. There were boxes everywhere. Jungkook stared. My mother kept all of this? Apparently. They began searching. Old documents. Photographs.
Clothes. Books.
A broken clock. Then Jimin found a cardboard box labeled with a single letter.
J.
He looked at Jungkook. What does that mean? Jungkook opened it. Inside were dozens of letters. Every envelope had the same handwriting. Jungkook picked up the first one. It was addressed to him. He opened it. My son. If you ever find this box, it means you have finally stopped running. Jungkook stopped reading. His eyes became wet. Jimin moved closer. Keep going. Jungkook continued. There are things I never told you because I wanted you to have a peaceful life. But peace built on silence eventually becomes another kind of prison. Jungkook closed his eyes. His mother had somehow known exactly what he would become. He continued reading. You will probably blame yourself for what happened. Please don't. You were never responsible for my choices. You were never responsible for saving me. Jungkook's hands shook. Jimin gently placed his hand over them. The letter continued. And if Jimin is with you when you read this, don't let fear convince you that you have to leave him again. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. She knew, Jimin whispered. Jungkook nodded. She knew everything. They read the rest together. The letter explained that Jungkook's mother had discovered the financial fraud months before her illness became serious. She had gathered evidence. She had trusted several people. One of those people betrayed her. But the person whose name appeared on the document had not betrayed her. Instead, that person had tried to help. Jimin looked at Jungkook. So we were wrong. Yes. Then why was their name written there? Maybe because my mother wanted me to find them. Jimin turned another page. There was a phone number. Beneath it were 4 words. Ask them about the night. Jimin stared at the sentence. What night? Jungkook didn't answer. He was already reaching for his phone. They called the number. The call connected after several rings. An elderly voice answered. Hello. Jungkook swallowed. Is this Mr. Han? There was silence. Yes. My name is Jungkook. Another silence. Then the voice became softer. I've been waiting for you. Jungkook froze. Jimin looked at him. You knew I would call? I knew eventually you would find your mother's letters. Why didn't you contact me? Because your mother asked me not to. Why? Because she believed you needed time. Jungkook looked down. Time for what? To stop blaming yourself. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Han continued. Your mother loved you more than anything. Jungkook's voice broke. I know.
No.
You don't. The words were gentle. You spent years believing she died because you failed to protect her. Jungkook became completely still. That isn't true. I know. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Because your mother made us promise. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Promise what? That when the time came, we would tell you that she never blamed you. Jungkook covered his face. Jimin moved closer and held him. For several moments, Jungkook couldn't speak. Then Mr. Han said something that made Jimin's heart stop. There's one more thing. What? Miho wasn't the person your mother feared most. Jungkook lifted his head. What did you say? Miho was dangerous, but he wasn't alone. Jimin's expression changed. Who was with him? Mr. Han hesitated. Someone close to your family. Jungkook's face hardened. Who? I can't say over the phone. Then where can we meet? Tomorrow. Where? The old garden behind your mother's house. The call ended. Jungkook slowly lowered the phone. Jimin stared at him. Someone else was involved. Yes. Someone close to your family? Yes. Jimin took his hand. We'll find out. Jungkook nodded. But this time he didn't look frightened. He looked determined. The following afternoon, they returned to the old house. The garden had become overgrown. Wild grass covered the stone path. An old wooden bench stood beneath a large tree. Mr. Han was already there. He looked older than Jimin expected. He carried a brown leather briefcase. When he saw Jungkook, he smiled sadly. You look like your mother. Jungkook looked down. Everyone says that. She would have been proud of you. Jungkook swallowed. What happened that night? Mr. Han sat on the bench. Your mother discovered that someone close to her had been giving Miho information. Who? Mr. Han opened the briefcase. Inside were documents. She trusted this person completely. Jimin leaned forward. Why would they betray her? Money. Jungkook shook his head.
No.
Mr. Han looked at him. Greed can make people do things they never thought they were capable of. Jungkook looked at the documents. Then he saw a photograph. His expression changed. The photograph showed his mother standing beside a man. Jimin recognized him immediately. It was the same person whose name appeared on the document. Jungkook stared. So they were working together.
No.
Mr. Han shook his head. They were trying to stop Miho. Jungkook looked confused. Then why did my mother write their name? Because she knew that person would become a target. Jimin understood. She was protecting them. Mr. Han nodded. She wanted you to find them eventually. Jungkook looked at the photograph. So all this time, I thought they betrayed my mother. They didn't. Then who did? Mr. Han's eyes became serious. Someone you never suspected. Jungkook looked at him. Who? Mr. Han slowly closed the briefcase. Your mother's closest friend. Jimin's breath caught. Why? She wanted the evidence for herself. Jungkook stood. What happened to her? She disappeared shortly after your mother's death. Where is she now? Mr. Han looked toward the road. We don't know. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Mr. Han looked directly at Jimin. Something she believes your mother left behind. Jimin's fingers tightened around Jungkook's hand. What? Mr. Han didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the silver moon necklace around Jimin's neck. His expression changed. Where did you get that? Jimin touched the pendant. Jungkook gave it to me. Mr. Han stared at it. Then he whispered something that made both of them freeze. That necklace isn't just a necklace. Jungkook looked at Jimin. What do you mean? Mr. Han stood. Your mother hid something inside it. Jimin's fingers immediately closed around the pendant. What? Evidence. Jungkook's eyes widened. What kind of evidence? The evidence everyone has been searching for. Jimin stared at the small silver moon. Suddenly, the necklace felt much heavier against his skin. Jungkook reached toward it. Take it off. Jimin removed the chain. Jungkook examined the pendant. There was a tiny seam along its edge. A hidden compartment. Jimin's heart pounded. Jungkook looked at him. All this time. Jimin nodded. The evidence was with me. Mr. Han's voice was quiet. Your mother knew that if she gave it directly to Jungkook, someone would search him. So she gave it to Jimin.
No.
Jungkook looked confused. She didn't give it to Jimin. Mr. Han looked at him. She gave it to you. Jungkook stared. But I bought this necklace for Jimin. Mr. Han nodded. I know. Silence. Jimin looked at the pendant. Jungkook looked at him. Neither understood. Then Mr. Han explained. Your mother purchased the necklace years ago and hid the evidence inside it. She gave it to Jungkook shortly before she died. Jungkook's eyes widened. But I don't remember. You were grieving. Jungkook stared at the necklace. Then a memory slowly returned. A hospital room. His mother smiling weakly. Her fingers placing something into his palm. Her voice whispering, "Give this to the person you love." Jungkook's breathing stopped. He remembered. He had forgotten the moment because of grief. He had carried the necklace for months. Then, years later, he saw Jimin looking at the same design in a shop window. He bought it. He had unknowingly returned his mother's final gift to the person she had intended to receive it. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. She knew. Jungkook nodded. She knew we'd find each other. Jimin held the necklace tightly. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Jimin smiled through his tears. She really did know you. Jungkook laughed softly. She knew me better than anyone. Mr. Han looked at them. Then keep it safe. Jungkook nodded. We will. Jimin looked at the moon pendant. For years, it had simply been a beautiful piece of jewelry. Now, it carried a secret. A mother's final act of protection. A piece of evidence that could finally expose the people who had destroyed her peace. But more importantly, it carried a message. A message that had survived years of silence. Love should not make you disappear. Love should give you the courage to stay. Jungkook reached for Jimin's hand. Jimin intertwined their fingers. They stood beneath the old tree, holding the necklace between them. Jungkook looked at Jimin. You know what I just realized? What? My mother was right. About what? You were always the person I was supposed to find. Jimin smiled. And you were always the person I was waiting for. Jungkook leaned closer. No dramatic words were necessary. No promises needed to be made. They had already chosen each other. And this time, they would face the truth together. Whatever came next, Jungkook would not run. Jimin would not let him. And neither of them would allow fear to decide the shape of their future. The silver moon pendant lay between Jungkook and Jimin on the wooden table, its surface catching the afternoon light like a tiny piece of the sky. Neither of them touched it for several seconds. After everything they had discovered, the necklace no longer felt like jewelry. It felt like a final message from Jungkook's mother. Jimin slowly reached for it. We need to open it. Jungkook nodded. But carefully. Jimin turned the pendant between his fingers. The seam was almost invisible. Jungkook searched the old house for a small tool while Jimin remained at the table. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Jimin suddenly looked toward the window. Jungkook. What? Someone is outside. Jungkook immediately turned. A dark figure stood near the garden gate. Jungkook moved toward the window. The figure disappeared behind the trees. Stay here.
No.
Jimin. We're doing this together. Jungkook looked at him, then nodded. They stepped outside. The garden was empty. Only the sound of leaves moving in the wind remained. Jungkook searched the path. Nothing. Then Jimin noticed something near the gate. A small envelope. He picked it up. There was no name. Only the familiar crescent moon. Jungkook's expression became serious. Don't open it. Jimin stopped. Why? We don't know who left it. Jimin looked at him. We need to know. Jungkook took the envelope carefully. Inside was a single photograph. Jungkook's mother. Standing beside Miho. And behind them stood another person. Jimin recognized the face. His breath caught. So that's her. Jungkook stared at the photograph. His voice became barely audible. My mother's closest friend. The woman in the photograph was smiling. But beneath the photograph was a handwritten sentence. She knows where the final evidence is. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Where? Jungkook shook his head. I don't know. Then another line appeared beneath it. Ask Jimin. Why would it say my name? Jungkook didn't answer. They returned inside. Jimin placed the photograph on the table. The silver pendant remained beside it. Everything seemed connected. The missing pages, the storage facility, the necklace. Jungkook's mother's friend. And now Jimin. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Maybe your mother didn't choose me by accident. Jungkook nodded slowly. Maybe. They opened the pendant. Inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. Jimin carefully unfolded it. There were only 6 words. Trust the one who remembers. Jungkook stared. Who remembers what? Jimin thought about the photograph. The hospital. Jungkook's expression changed.
Me.
Jimin shook his head. You don't remember everything. Jungkook looked confused. What do you mean? Your mother said you were grieving. You forgot things. Jungkook stared at the paper. What if I forgot something important? Then we find it. Jungkook sat down. He closed his eyes. Jimin watched him. Try to remember the night before your mother died. Jungkook's breathing became slow. I remember the hospital. What else? My mother was awake. Keep going. She gave me something. The necklace. Yes. What did she say? Jungkook frowned. I can't hear her voice. Try. Silence. Then Jungkook suddenly opened his eyes. She told me not to trust the woman. Jimin froze. What woman? My mother's friend. Jungkook stood. She told me she had betrayed her. But Mr. Han said she wasn't the traitor. I know. Then why did your mother warn you? Jungkook looked confused. Maybe because she knew something else. They searched the notebook again. This time, Jimin noticed a faint indentation beneath one of the pages. He placed the paper beneath a lamp. A hidden message slowly became visible. Don't trust appearances. Beneath it was a name. Not the woman's. Miho's. Jimin stared. She knew he wasn't alone. Jungkook nodded. She knew. Suddenly his phone rang. Unknown number. Jungkook answered. Hello. No response. Who is this? A man's voice finally spoke. You have something that belongs to me. Jungkook's face hardened. Miho. Jimin stood beside him.
The voice laughed.
You always were clever. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What do you want? The necklace. Jungkook looked at Jimin. You're not getting it. You don't understand what you're carrying. I understand enough. No, Jungkook. You don't. The call became silent. Then Miho said something that changed everything. Your mother didn't hide the evidence because she wanted to expose me. Then why? She was protecting someone. Who? Miho laughed. You'll figure it out. The call ended. Jungkook lowered the phone. Jimin looked at him. I don't know. The pendant suddenly felt cold in Jimin's hand. They decided to return to the city. On the drive home, neither spoke. Jimin watched Jungkook's hands gripping the steering wheel. You're thinking again? Yes. Tell me. What if the evidence isn't about Miho? Jimin frowned. What else could it be? Jungkook looked ahead. What if my mother discovered something about the people around her? Jimin thought about the mysterious photograph. Then we need to find out who is closest to her. We already know. Your father? Jungkook's hands tightened. My father died when I was young. Then Mr. Han. He wasn't the only one. Jimin remembered the photograph. There was someone else. Jungkook glanced at him. Who? The person standing beside your mother in the old photograph. Jungkook understood. My mother's friend. Exactly. They returned home. Jimin placed the pendant inside a small safe. Then they began researching the woman. Her name was Yuna. She had worked with Jungkook's mother for more than 15 years. She had been present during every major event. She had helped raise Jungkook after his father died. She had attended the funeral. Then she disappeared. Jimin stared at the information. She was family. Jungkook nodded. That makes this worse. Why? Because if she betrayed my mother, he couldn't finish. Jimin took his hand. You don't know that yet. I know. Then don't punish her before you know the truth. Jungkook looked at him. You always see the good in people. Not always. What do you see in me? Jimin smiled. Someone who spent years trying to protect everyone except himself. Jungkook laughed softly. That's painfully accurate. Jimin leaned against him. We'll find the truth. That night, Jimin couldn't sleep. He walked into the living room. The city lights flickered beyond the windows. He opened the safe. The pendant was still there. He picked it up. Something felt different. He examined the hidden compartment again. There was another layer. A tiny screw. Jimin's eyes widened. He carefully loosened it. The back panel opened. Inside was a miniature photograph. Jimin pulled it out. His breath caught. It was a picture of Jungkook as a child. He was standing beside his mother, but someone else was holding his hand. A young girl. Jimin looked closer. There was a small scar above the girl's eyebrow. He had seen that scar before. On Yuna. Jimin's heart pounded. Then he noticed writing on the back. She protected him once. She may protect him again. Jimin stared at the words. Yuna had not betrayed Jungkook's mother. She had protected Jungkook. But why had she disappeared? Before Jimin could think further, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Jungkook stood in the doorway. What are you doing? Jimin held up the photograph. I found something. Jungkook approached. He saw the photograph. His face changed. I remember her. Yuna? Jungkook nodded. She used to take care of me. What happened? Jungkook stared at the girl in the photograph. She disappeared after my mother died. Why? I don't know. Jimin turned the photograph over. Maybe she was protecting you. Jungkook read the message. His eyes filled with tears. She was like family. Then we find her. Jungkook nodded. We will. The next morning, they discovered an old address belonging to Yuna. They drove there. The house was empty, but someone had recently lived there. There were fresh footprints near the back door. Jungkook opened it. Inside, everything was covered in dust except one table. Jungkook approached slowly. The photograph had been taken recently. Jimin's blood ran cold. Someone has been watching us. Jungkook took his hand. Yes. A note lay beneath the photograph. Jungkook picked it up. You finally found the right person. Jimin stared at the message. Who? Another sentence was written beneath it. The person who protected Jungkook all these years. Jungkook looked around the empty house. Yuna. Then they heard a noise upstairs. Both froze. Jungkook moved in front of Jimin. Stay behind me. Jungkook. Please. They climbed the stairs slowly. Another sound came from the end of the hallway. Jungkook opened the door. Empty. Only an old chair. A window was open. The curtain moved in the wind. On the floor lay another envelope. Jimin picked it up. Inside was a handwritten letter. Jungkook. If you're reading this, you have finally learned enough to understand why I disappeared. I never betrayed your mother. I was protecting you. But there is one thing you still don't know. Jimin leaned closer. Jungkook continued reading. Miho was never the person who destroyed your mother's life. He was only the person who helped me uncover the truth. Jungkook stared at the page. His breathing stopped. The letter continued. The real danger came from someone much closer. Someone you trusted. Someone who knew exactly how much Jimin meant to you. Jimin's eyes widened. Jungkook slowly lowered the letter. The room became completely silent. Neither of them spoke. Because suddenly, the mystery was no longer about Jungkook's past. It was about someone who knew their present. Someone who knew their relationship. Someone who had been close enough to watch them fall in love. And somewhere beyond the empty house, someone was watching them again. Jungkook stared at the letter until the words blurred before his eyes. The real danger came from someone much closer. Jimin stood beside him, silent. For years, Jungkook had believed the greatest threat had come from somewhere outside his life. He had blamed Miho. He had blamed himself. He had blamed the fear that had convinced him to disappear and leave Jimin behind. But now he understood. The danger had never been as far away as he thought. Jungkook folded the letter carefully. Jimin. Yes. Whatever happens next, stay beside me. Jimin took his hand. I already promised. They returned to the old house and showed Mr. Han everything they had discovered. When he saw the letter, his expression changed. There is only one person who knew about the connection between Jungkook and Jimin. Who? Jimin asked. Mr. Han hesitated. Yuna. Jungkook shook his head. No. She protected me. She did, Mr. Han said. But protection doesn't mean she was innocent of everything. Jungkook stared at him. What are you saying? Yuna protected you from Miho, but she also kept secrets from your mother. Jimin looked between them. What kind of secrets? Mr. Han sighed. Your mother discovered that someone had been manipulating the evidence. She suspected Yuna knew more than she admitted. Jungkook lowered his eyes. So, Yuna wasn't the traitor? No. Then who was? Mr. Han looked directly at Jimin, the person who had access to everything. Jimin's heart tightened. Someone close to us. Mr. Han nodded. And there's only one person who fits. Jungkook's expression hardened. He already knew. The person whose name had appeared on the old document. The person they had trusted. The person who had recently been asking questions about their lives. Jungkook immediately reached for his phone. I need to call them. Don't, Mr. Han warned. Why? Because if they realize you know, they will disappear. Jungkook stopped. Jimin touched his arm. We need evidence. Jungkook looked at him. You're right. They spent the next 2 days gathering everything. Every photograph. Every letter. Every transaction. Every message. They discovered that the person they suspected had secretly transferred money from accounts connected to Jungkook's mother's company. The betrayal had lasted years. And when Jungkook's mother discovered it, she had tried to expose the truth. That was when Miho became involved. But Miho had not been the mastermind. He had been another victim of the same scheme. Yuna had disappeared because she was protecting Jungkook. And Jungkook's mother had hidden the final evidence inside the necklace. The necklace Jungkook had eventually given to Jimin. The truth had been traveling toward them for years. One evening, Jungkook and Jimin sat together on the balcony. The city stretched beneath them. Jimin held the silver moon pendant between his fingers. I still can't believe all of this. Jungkook smiled. Neither can I. Your mother planned everything. Maybe not everything. Jimin looked at him. She knew we would find each other. Jungkook nodded. She always believed we would. Jimin smiled. Then he leaned his head against Jungkook's shoulder. You know what the strangest part is? What? You said you found the woman of your dreams. Jungkook laughed. That feels like another lifetime. You were trying to make me jealous. I was. You were terrible at it. I was terrified. Jimin smiled. You still are. Yes. Of what? Jungkook looked at him. Losing you. Jimin reached for his hand. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I know. Because I'm staying. Jungkook squeezed his fingers. Promise. Promise. A month later, the truth was finally exposed. The evidence hidden inside the moon pendant proved enough to reopen the investigation into the financial scheme. Miho cooperated with the authorities. Yuna finally returned. She stood before Jungkook with tears in her eyes. I am sorry. Jungkook looked at her for a long moment. You should have told me. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because your mother asked me to protect you. Jungkook sighed. I spent years thinking you abandoned me. I never did. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. I know that now. Yuna looked toward Jimin. And you? Jimin smiled gently. Me? Your mother always knew. Jimin's expression softened. Knew what? That you would be the one who taught Jungkook how to stay. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Jungkook smiled. Yuna gave them the last letter from Jungkook's mother. Jungkook opened it that evening. My son. If you are reading this, then you have survived the part of your life you thought would destroy you. Please remember something. You cannot protect the people you love by disappearing from them. You cannot save someone by carrying all their pain alone. And you cannot spend your life running from the possibility of losing someone. Love requires courage. If Jimin is beside you when you read this, hold his hand. Don't let go. Jungkook's tears fell onto the paper. Jimin sat beside him. Jungkook reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. He whispered, I won't let go. Jimin leaned against him. I know. Years later, they returned to the old house. The garden had been restored. The wild grass was gone. The old wooden bench had been repaired. Jungkook sat beneath the same tree where he had once learned the truth about his mother. Jimin sat beside him. The silver moon pendant still rested around Jimin's neck. Jungkook touched it gently. You still wear it. Every day. Why? Because it reminds me of you. Jungkook smiled. What about my mother? That too. The evening sky turned deep blue. Stars slowly appeared above them. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Do you remember when I said I found the woman of my dreams? Jimin laughed. Yes. I was wrong. Jimin raised an eyebrow. You were? Yes. Then who did you find? Jungkook smiled. I didn't find anyone. He took Jimin's hand. I found home. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. You're going to make me cry. I don't mind. You're impossible. I know. Jimin rested his head against Jungkook's shoulder. They sat quietly beneath the stars. No secrets remained. No letters waited in hidden drawers. No footsteps followed them. No one needed to run. Jungkook had once believed love meant finding someone perfect. Jimin had once believed love meant hiding feelings to protect a friendship. They had both been wrong. Love was imperfect. Love was frightening. Love sometimes arrived disguised as friendship and waited patiently for years before either person understood what it meant. Jungkook had called Jimin the woman of his dreams because he had been too afraid to say the truth. But the truth had always been simpler. Jimin was the person Jungkook had searched for without knowing he was searching. And Jungkook was the person Jimin had waited for without knowing he was waiting. The silver moon remained around Jimin's neck. A small reminder of a mother's final wish. A symbol of secrets finally revealed. A promise that had survived fear, distance, grief, and time. Jungkook looked at Jimin one last time. Stay with me. Jimin smiled. Always. And beneath the quiet night sky, Jungkook finally understood what his mother had wanted him to learn. Home was never a place. Home was the person who made you brave enough to stay. For Jungkook, that person had always been Jimin. And for Jimin, it had always been Jungkook.